Anyway, so okay, talk about the title. Why is it perfect? At the same time, it's imperfect. It's like an oxymoron.
Yes, yeah, the perfectly imperfect ways we remember. Um, I think this goes to the starting point of kind of why we wrote the book and why we wrote the book the way that we did. We're not the first people to write a book about memory, and often, popular science books about memory and even science communication about memory, myself included, often you sort of become kind of a bit doom and gloom. You become kind of, oh, look how terrible it is. It's the worst, and you can't trust anything. And that kind of is the message, is that we're so terrible and everything is an illusion, and memory is terrible, and everyone's going to go, be convicted for crimes they didn't commit. And that can kind of be the tone. And then I find, when I teach on my subject or when I think about it myself, often then the response to that is like, God, I thought evolution would have done a better job than that. Why are we so bad at remembering? Why aren't we better? And then I find in response to that, I will say, oh no, but there's an upside to all of these flaws. And I think maybe historically, in the way that we've communicated about memory science, we haven't quite captured both of those things together because obviously the flaws are kind of more interesting and more dramatic. You talk about wrongful convictions and you talk about completely false memories, and you talk about, planting memories in people who are unsuspecting and things like that. That's all very dramatic. But what we wanted to achieve in this book, I suppose, is that balance of saying, yeah, it's imperfect, but we did actually get to this point for a reason, and it is perfectly imperfect. And though our memories are flawed, and sometimes we have too high expectations of what our memories can do, they do still do a good job. We're sitting here. You remember the book that you read. You remember when you were 3 years old. You have relationships. You have habits. You have attitudes. Like all of those things are founded on memory, and so it's imperfect, but perfectly imperfect, is what we say.
Well, so continuing with the cover, then you were just saying Tetris. I was saying Legos because you talk about Legos, and even like Jenga. I was thinking about,
Yeah.
but so start with you start with a Lego tower that's perfectly formed. It has a geometric shape, and then in your illustration, which I should be able to show, but I can't. In your illustration, you show how it I was thinking, okay, what's the word? Disintegrates? No. How it reconsolidates? No. What is it doing in those three pictures?
Yeah, it changes. So I suppose maybe to start with, when people talk about memory, I suppose they and anyone listening, you might think of your memory. I think for me, the metaphor I would use in my mind before I became interested in memory, I probably think of my memories like books on a shelf, like you have behind you here. I think I would think of them like that. And if you said to me, when was the first time you went to Disneyland? I think I find the Disneyland section of the shelf and I pull out that memory. I look at it, I fold it back up, and I put it away. And I think a lot of us, a lot of this goes back to Aristotle, all these different metaphors of memory. They used to talk about memory as a wax seal, and experience was the print that was pressed into the wax seal. And we think of it as storage, that you store it and then you take it out and then you put it back. And I suppose what we know now from kind of decades of mostly experimental memory research is that it's not like that at all. So there is no one place in your brain that memories are stored. This idea of these bookshelves where the memories are, it just doesn't exist. Instead, every time you recall something, you essentially build the memory from scratch. That's why we talk about a Lego tower. So you've got all the little pieces of the memory, your memory of having an accident as a child. You'll have kind of what age you were, where you were, who was there, how you felt, maybe what it smelled like, what the weather was like. You've got all these little blocks and you build it all up. And if you think of each of those pieces, each of those Lego blocks as literally kind of scattered across your brain, they're in all different locations. And then to remember that memory as you go along, you're sort of building the Lego tower. You're pulling out all those pieces like a Jenga tower, like a Jenga block. You're building it all up, and then that is the memory. And you do that every time you remember something.